So I found the most cursed Pokemon, and I decided to put him in a very apt location. So let me first show you real quick on the monitor, because we have to monitor this dude because he is a threat to society as a whole. Then there's, oh shoot, where'd he go? Where'd he go? He's gone. This is in the sewers. There's a Mr. Mime in there, but he might have escaped, so I'm gonna have to go check on him. Hey everyone, so we're back. It's been kind of a while since I last recorded the end of the game, but right now my goal is to basically finish the Pokédex. I'll show you. I have about 250, but I think there's like 300 and something. And so I'm going to try to build habitats for all the ones that I'm missing. Oh, wait. 300, yeah, there's 300. Okay. So I'm missing what, like 44, I suppose? So I'll try to, I want to make habitats for all of them. But then essentially, I also thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about sea turtle ecology while I do this. And so I have my PowerPoint pulled up from my thesis presentation that I gave. And while I won't go into detail about everything because some of it's a little dense, I do want to talk about the gist because right now, sea turtle season, if you're in the US, sea turtle season is starting up in the northeast. Sorry, northeast. In the southeast. Definitely not the northeast. I wouldn't recommend going to Massachusetts or further north to look for sea turtles. It'll be kind of a fruitless endeavor. But, so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about that. Exciting times. Yeah, I pretty much, you'll see this, I'll probably do like at some point, like just a tour of all the stuff I built. I haven't like completed everything I want to build, like I haven't done that many organized builds much yet. I still need to figure out what I'm going to do with Pallet Town. However, I've kind of done a lot. I feel like if you're looking around, I put more decorations up, I changed the stairs there. A lot of old stuff. So let me finish grabbing this stuff and we'll just dive right on in. So yeah, other than that, things have been good. I honestly had a bit of a rough day today, just like in general, mental health wise, etc. So I'm gonna just try to be take it slow. Try to be a little more chill with this video. So yeah, and also just because I'm not chewing my face right now, just because I'm going to be looking over at my phone where I have my notes and things like that. So I just figured it'd be kind of weird if I was just like looking around all between screens and stuff. And quite frankly, I'm kind of a little disheveled at the moment. So I wasn't really, thank you, by the way, extra drill. So I wasn't really in the mood. So, anyway, right now there's the Sableye event going on, so that was really cool. Like, I really like the decorations from the Hot Pip event, but I mean, this is pretty awesome, right? All these gems. I got some of these and put them up here, so that was pretty cool. I really like the decorations and like the map and compass. Ooh, you can make your own like treasure map kind of thing in this. Oh, sweet. Okay. How much money are we getting this time? Oh, that's a lot of money. Dang, I appreciate it. Blastoise. Ooh. Okay, alright, what can we buy today? Oh, okay. Yeah, I got this. And then, looks like some unique variants of flowers, so that is handy. I recently found out that you can actually take pictures of plants and use the 3D printer to build more of them, which is insane. Like, it's so amazing. Because I was just like, where do you get these spearberries and the raspberries? I can't find any of them, but that's where. So let me put this away. And alright, so let's look at the Pokédex real quick, because I gotta figure out what my first move is. first one we're missing is wheezing. So let me take a look at that. Wheezing. I have my phone. I'm looking at the habitat information. Okay. So for him, my best bet is Pallet Town. And I need the good old-fashioned antiques. So, antique closet. Do I have the recipe for that even? Anyway, so sea turtles. I do have it. Sweet. Okay. Yeah, I just gotta grab my stuff. So, for those of you who don't know much about sea turtles, or if you live somewhere where there aren't sea turtles are, you know, giant marine reptiles that swim around in the oceans. I mean, they're literally what they're described. Aquatic turtles. And the neat thing about sea turtles is that they are, I mean, there's so many neat things about sea turtles, let's be honest. You know what, give me a sec. I want to do this. I don't want to be like free associating while I speak because I'm not thinking through what I say, and I want to make sure I'm telling you guys quality things instead of just spewing whatever. Alright, need some more of that. Probably more of that. Might just snag this. Probably will need paper, right? There's some cool stuff you can do with that. And then... yeah, that's probably okay. Alright, and this, I need to like turn these into Gimmighoul. I need to get these appraised. I really wish there was a mass appraise button because that would be... oh, and I need to summon a Lugia, which I can do with the title bell. Alright, and so... oh, you know what I should also grab is leopard berries in bulk because I will probably need them. Alright. And I think that's the gist of it, right? No, wait, I'm forgetting something. Apologies, I feel like I'm all over the place right now. Where did I put all my drinks? There we go. Alright, bread, salad, soup, I think. Wait, no, I don't have soup there. Is it down here? Yes. Alright, cool. Should be all set. So, I'm gonna need an antique closet, antique bed, antique dresser, and an antique chair. So, sea turtle ecology. So first things first, I wanted to talk about like sea turtles in general. So kind of what I did for my degree was what I focused on was the sea turtles themselves, like their ecology, but also how things like climate change and environmental factors are impacting them. So I want to first of all preface all this with the fact that, you know, I have worked with sea turtles, but I'm not like, and while I have done a degree, I'm not like the foremost authority on everything. So you know, while I can tell you quite a lot, I am not the only person who you should go to for information regarding sea turtles in general. Additionally, you know, sea turtles are all endangered species, so they are not pets, they are wild animals. So obviously, if you see one, do not engage. You're welcome to watch, you know, but don't mess with them because they're just doing their thing. All right, you know, maybe they probably can't physically harm you in any way, but just don't mess with them. All right, have some respect for nature. So with that out of the way, I did want to talk about just kind of all the cool things about them. And then I will be talking about climate change. If that is an issue for you, if climate change if you don't believe in climate change, if you don't feel like it's a major issue, I would kindly recommend that you, I mean, maybe beggars can't be choosers, but, because I don't have that many subscribers, but I would kind of recommend please just either try to read up some reputable sources, or this is not the video for you. Maybe even not the channel for you. Because it's a major thing that we are all going through, and it's getting worse the longer we don't address it. So, you know, and even if you don't believe in climate change, you know, it's important to have some respect for the world around you. We are not the only living things on this planet, and even if we were, it's not healthy to behave like we are. So, diving in. So what I want to talk about was sort of the ways that climate change will impact sea turtles. Given that live in the US, I will primarily be talking about sea turtles in the southeast US, just because that is where they are most abundant in terms of nesting there. However, you know, this is something that happens. You know, this is an issue that is mostly ubiquitous throughout the world, more so in some areas than others, and it affects certain species more than others. So it's, from my personal experience, I cannot offer an all-encompassing perspective, but that does not mean that it's not important information. So, anyway. So first and foremost, sea turtles, they have a lot of intrinsic value. Of course, they're charismatic, you think that's cool. You know, sea turtles, they're fun species, you know. They're really interesting. I mean, they are obviously an instance of where their ancestors originally were aquatic, then they became terrestrial turtles, and then they later evolved to go back into the ocean with their flippers because they have a full set of lungs, but the flippers are, you know, a more recent development. Sea turtles themselves, though, are an ancient species. They've been around for millions of years in some way, shape, or another. So, for instance, with Pokemon, the only sea turtle species that we have is the Turtauga line, so Turtauga and Caracosta. And for them, they, you know, I mean, their typing is water and rock, and definitely that's a pretty apt typing given that, you know, they're supposed to be fossils, because these animals have been existing in some form for eons, you know? And then water, of course, because, you know, they're in the oceans. But yeah, so essentially that is the first thing. Secondly, so I focused on the southeast, which has some very specific forms of conservation and management that might be different from other areas, but, you know, if you're in the US, that's pretty important. So essentially, to dive on in, there are seven species of sea turtles. And actually, hold on. So there are 7 species of sea turtles. So there's the loggerhead sea turtle, the green sea turtle, the leatherback sea turtle, the hawksbill, the Kemp's ridley, the olive ridley, and the flatback. And in the United States, the United States only really gets 5 species of sea turtles, but and the most abundant of which is loggerheads. So the 5 to 7 species have been observed nesting along the U.S. coastlines. So that's loggerhead, green, Kemp's ridley, olive ridley, and leatherback. And so of those, loggerheads are the most abundant. I personally worked with loggerheads mostly. I have worked with some green sea turtles as well. I've always wanted to see a leatherback, but I have not seen one. And leatherbacks are the biggest species of sea turtles. Loggerheads, however, are a big predominance. My goal of my thesis was to catalog and probe the ways that climate change are going to impact sea turtles, to assess the value of sea turtles as a keystone species and as an important member of the, ecological community in both terrestrial and aquatic environments. And I also wanted to emphasize the study area, which I did the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast along the eastern United States. I touched on the nesting process and the most effective ways for intervention and monitoring, and then forecasting how livelihood these species and, based on species, will shift and be affected by climatic changes that we can expect in the future. So that was kind of the gist, and that's kind of what I will be talking about today. If I can multitask like this, because my goodness. Alright, so I got this. But yeah, I really hope that because Generation 10 is going to be in the maritime continent, so like the, Philippines kind of area, I really hope that they have something along the lines of another sea turtle species, because we really like Carcosta and Tartarga are great, but there are 7 sea turtle species, and that's just, they only really encompass. I mean, looking at them, I guess they would seem kind of like a hawksbill. But to be quite honest, they're a little ambiguous, but, they're also fossils, so because of that, they kind of get left behind a lot. It'd be nice if there was a more, like, generic Pokemon that was, a sea turtle species. Oh, hey, what's up, Limit? Sure. Don't have time for this, but why not? Garbage, right? I remember that. Yeah, he likes garbage. Made a stupid short about it. Alrighty, so I'll put Tangela over here. Yeah, I think this fits. And then this is here. Yeah, now we're cooking. Okay. Sweet. So, with that in mind, climate change is one of the biggest threats to sea turtles. In the past, their populations were diminished a lot by shrimp trawling, at least in the United States, it is an international thing. So shrimp trawling is a practice with the large fishing industries where, for shrimp trawling, what they'll do is they'll get a giant seine or shrimp net, drag it behind boats in a lot of sort of aquatic coastal areas offshore. Of course, sea turtles, they don't dive that deep generally. And so what they will do is drag behind the boat as they go along, and they'll catch a lot of shrimp. Now, that meant, well, it's not all well and good because it's a very harmful practice. Because not only sea turtles, but there's a lot of other species that are caught as bycatch. So that occurs when something else that is not intended gets caught up in the net and then subsequently dies because it's caught up in a net and it's choked. Or it's dragged up, or it can't, find, it's stuck out of its habitat, gets dragged for miles behind the boat, all that stuff like that. Does that sound like something that is fun or good for your well-being? It's not. So that was the reason why a lot of sea turtle species died off, or not species died off, but the sea turtle population is greatly diminished in recent years. And so because of that, the historic numbers where there are, quite literally millions and millions of turtles out there in the oceans, that has gone down a ton, exponentially. And thankfully, due to international intervention, human actions, the populations have been making a tentative recovery. But the problem with sea turtles, the reason why it's so detrimental, is sea turtles are a species that really, for them, it's a little difficult to describe, but I'm going to get into this concept called life history. And so basically the way that works is that sea turtles produce a lot of young. So a sea turtle, for a loggerhead, for instance, will produce a nest that is, they'll lay each summer. So once a sea turtle reaches sexual maturity at the age of 30, particularly, I'm talking about loggerheads here. The numbers are a little different for each species, but loggerheads are the ones I'm most familiar with. Loggerheads reach maturity at age 30. From there, they come back to nest roughly every 3-4 years. It just depends on the turtle and depends on the age generally. But they will come back to nest, and then they'll lay, depending on just, how much energy and resources they have, somewhere between, I don't know, roughly 4 to 8 nests per year, or per summer, starting around May-ish and going until towards the end of July. Maybe August, we'll see. It depends on the turtle. But, with that, they produce, each nest has about, I don't know, 80 to 120 eggs. So multiply that times 8, and I don't know, you got maybe 1,000 offspring, roughly, give or take, per sea turtle per season that comes out every few years. So that means one sea turtle over the lifetime can produce, I don't know, what is that? Oh, I need to actually do the math. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, no, she liked it. Okay, that's fine. So let's be generous. Do 120. So turtles generally, there's the myth of like, oh, they live super long. They live like to be 150. No, they don't generally live that long, but they do live to be like 80s, maybe 90s, depending on the turtle. Assuming nothing else gets them and they aren't, they don't eat anything that's bad for them or whatever else. Naturally, they could live up to that length. So, assuming maybe 60 years of, ability to reproduce, divide that by maybe 3 because they come back every 3 years. That's 20 seasons that a turtle will be, or 20 years of their lives that they will be spending actively sort of spending a summer laying on the beach. So 20 times maybe 120 eggs per nest times 8 nests. So one sea turtle can produce about 19,000 eggs, if we're being generous, throughout their lifetime. On the contrary, statistically, a hatchling sea turtle, not an adult, a hatchling, has about a 1 in 1,000% chance with human help. It could be worse without human help. Is a 1 in 1,000% chance of making it to adulthood, like surviving to the age of 30, because everything eats on land in the water. Then there's like, can they get out to the foraging areas? So that means, if an individual hatchling dies, it's not a huge consequence. It's not great, but it's like, okay, well, this happens. Versus if an adult dies, that means potentially 20,000 potential hatchlings that could come from that, which, assuming that's still 20 turtles that could come from an adult turtle that could live statistically to be an adult. So when you select adults out of the population in an artificial way that the animals are not used to, that is what has caused a huge decrease in the overall population, because it's not a natural predator. Sea turtle hatchlings get eaten by birds, fish, crabs, raccoons, wild boars, you name it, they eat them. They're like chicken nuggets of the sea, right? So, everything eats them. So it's something in the world they get eaten, but it is a bigger deal if an adult gets left out of the population. They're prepared to lose hatchlings here or there. Losing some more hatchlings wouldn't be too bad, but losing adults are bad. So because of that, if you have decades and decades of this sort of thing happening, where these adults are subsequently artificially removed from the population, you have a much smaller subset of species of sea turtles available that are able to nest as adults. And sea turtles, they're not like flies or something with really short lifespans. They live a long time. So it's hard for them, even if they were able to adapt, it takes so long for them to adapt to things, because a generation's 30 years at minimum, like a generation difference. So, they don't have time to adapt to something big like that, especially when it's something that's not a natural thing. So when that happened, that's why a lot of the populations were really diminished over time. So that's kind of the background for all this, essentially. So sea turtle populations have that, but they have been recovering gradually over time with human help, thankfully. The thing is, now that we've got that, shrimp trawling practices have mostly, not always, but for the most part, been kind of contained in the sense that there was the invention in, I believe, the 1960s or so, but really put into practice mainstream around 1990, of the turtle, with the turtle excluder device, which is a little sort of almost a trapdoor kind of thing that exists that people were able to put into these same nets that they use for shrimp trawling. And those basically have helped to greatly reduce the number of sea turtles that are caught up in the bycatch, because I'll include a picture probably or a diagram, but the way it works is that essentially if a sea turtle gets caught in one of them, the shrimp trawling nets, there'll be a way for the turtle to be able to swim out and get up. And turtles, they're not the brightest, but they can figure out if they're going to try to swim out, so they'll figure a way out. So that has reduced a lot the mortality rate for sea turtles, adult sea turtles that get caught in these nests, which is great because that has reduced the pressure that we as people have been putting on them. So that is good. What is not good, however, the next major threat that humans have kind of been causing is climate change. And so that is the remaining major threat for sea turtles. Because first of all, their population size has not recovered. It's still very much vulnerable. Most sea turtle species are either vulnerable or endangered. And so because of that, any other stressor, environmental, human, whatever, has a bigger effect because there are fewer species to there are fewer individual sea turtles to fall back on if something happens to a handful. So that is one of the major things. The other factor is like what I said before, they take a long time. Oh no, okay. They take a long time to adapt to things because they're so long-lived. A generation is a relatively long time in terms of if a major event happens, especially if it's artificial. So climate change, the age of the Anthropocene, which is what we consider the time really since the settlers came to the United States, back in the 1600s, that's really when humanity started having such a major effect on the world as a whole that it started to change the very climate and ecosystem and natural components of the world to something that has never been, was unprecedented levels. Now, this has accelerated in the last 50 years. Hey, Magmortar isn't exactly a volcano, but if you want to work the kitchen here, that's totally fine. Nice. Yeah, that'd be preferable. I really would prefer that. I'd cry so much if this place would have been flames. Yeah, thankfully it's built over water. But like Magmortar, we are also might experience, not 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, but we are also we're experiencing warmer global temperatures. And, for those of you who are like, oh, well, it was cold last winter. Well, it's not everywhere all the time. It's the global average. And one of the facets of that is not necessarily that everything is getting warmer, but that the weather and the climate is becoming more erratic. So that could look like droughts in some areas, fires in some areas. That could look like melting of, the Arctic. But that could look like with the melting, you have the cold water, which will affect air currents, etc., which will change the overall, ocean currents and the Pacific and Atlantic gyres, which are all things that help to maintain this very delicate homeostasis and equilibrium between, all over the place. So, the term, instead of global warming, global weirding is another term I've heard thrown around, and that is something that kind of explains it a bit better. Of course, there's also the fact that we're getting stronger storm systems. If it's warmer, then the weather can, storm systems can hold more energy in warmer weather. just because heat conducts more energy. And so then you'll get more intense storm systems, which can cause more damage, all that stuff. So sea turtles are privy to a lot of manifestations of climate change, especially, the warming itself, the storm systems that potentially they might experience, and, migration, changes of food sources, sea level rise as well, because they rely on the beaches for their nesting habitat. So I just kind of threw out a lot of stuff. I thought that I was going to be more structured with this, but I guess not. I'm going to pause for a sec and try to find the next Pokemon that I need to do. Alright, so I need regular Tangrowth, right? So how do I do that? What does he like? Oh, I can only find him on a cloud island. Alright, I'll go do that. Wait, but I can't do that yet. Okay, I'll do that off screen maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I'll do that later. I do not feel like doing that now. Okay, and then Gyarados. How do I find Gyarados? Sparkling Skylands. Oh, Illuminated. I can do that, yeah. So, first of all, climate change. So the emission of climate change is primarily caused by the emission of greenhouse gases from human activity. So it's increased the Earth's average surface temperature by about 1.1 degrees Celsius from what it was, in 1850 to 1900. Which that seems like, oh, that's pretty gradual. That's a small amount for a long time. For those of you who don't use, for instance, I use Fahrenheit, which is that's around maybe 2-ish degrees Fahrenheit, which you're like, oh, that's not bad. Well, that's everywhere, and that's an average. So there's some areas that'll be higher than that, and some will be lower than that. And depending on the area, that might be the threshold that puts it over places where ice melts into water, or things like that, which could be big. The other issue is that it's accelerating. The more we do, the more it's harder to put things back to the way they were. There's kind of an acceleration factor, and it's harder to, once you change components of the environment, such as that, it just kind of has this bit of a snowball effect. And I could get into the details of all that, and I'm happy to in another video, but that's just the way it is with the environment. It's very kind of a delicate thing. So basically, there's the IPCC report. The most recent one I think came out in 2023. But that basically was showing that, under major conditions, we could get significant increases to the global temperatures expected in especially 50 to 100 years from now, which, which cause and have started to cause and will continue to cause the 6th global major mass extinction. Every other, one of them being, for instance, major mass extinction. Everyone knows about the meteor that killed the dinosaurs. That was a global mass extinction. The one we are causing now is actually, it's happening at a faster rate and in a more severe manner than that, which is insane, but it's just the way it is. And I'm not trying to be alarmist with any of this. There are ways to fix all them, but it's just something to keep in mind for a background of all this and how sea turtles themselves are impacted by all of this. So first of all, I want to talk about sea turtle nesting biology, because that is some really cool stuff. So sea turtles themselves, they spend the vast majority of their lives in the ocean. The minute a sea turtle hatchling goes into the water for the first time, they generally don't come back until, for females, they don't come back for decades until they are mature and about to lay something. For the males, they generally don't come back at all because they have no reason to, right? Because they forage and eat everything out in the ocean. Alright, illuminated waterfall. Whoops. So, sea turtles, like I mentioned before, the mortality rates, hatchlings generally only about 1 in 1,000 lives to the age of adulthood. To a reproductive age specifically, where they can produce more hatchlings. And that's due to depredation, so things that eat them on land and in the water. So like so much eats them, guys. Like it's insane. Which is good because they feed a lot of other animals. Which also means it's a double-edged sword. If something were to happen to sea turtles and they lost, sea turtles vanished from the world, then there would be one less food source for a lot of animals. Which, yeah, it's one less food source, but if other things are disappearing for other reasons, potentially due to climate, potentially due to chance, because there's always background extinctions going on, then there's a lot less for them to eat. And so that, of course, is bad news. Yeah, I talked a little bit about the eggs per nest. Basically, sea turtles, when a female comes up, she will dig her flipper into the sand and basically use it to scoop it out and make what looks like, if you take a light bulb, if you're holding it up, like the Edison light bulb, holding it up at the bottom, flip it upside down, and then if that was hollow, that's what it would look like, the shape of a nest. It's kind of like a curved bell kind of under into the ground, or in the sand, rather. Generally, it's about as deep as, like, I don't know, 2 feet, 3 feet, maybe not 3 feet, 2-ish feet, give or take. Probably take more, but that's kind of how deep it is, and it's a big chamber where they'll lay the eggs. And so, like I mentioned, generally varies based on the sea turtle species, but for loggerheads, which is the most common in the United States, there can be about 80 to 120 eggs per nest, potentially, I don't know, 4 to 8 nests per sea turtle per year that they come up. And they'll come back, once they leave, they'll come back maybe generally around every, 3, 4, sometimes 2 years, depends on the turtle. So sea turtles, another cool thing about them is that they do not have sex chromosomes. So humans, we're male or female, at least biologically, genetically. Well, there's a gray area. I will put an asterisk there. But for the most part, humans either have an X chromosome, like their 23rd chromosome set is XX or XY, and that determines their sex. Not their gender necessarily, but their sex. And so, hold on, okay. Sea turtles don't have anything like that. Their physical anatomy is based on the temperature of their incubation that they're exposed to during a pivotal part of their development. So sea turtles, they incubate for about 2 months, but they can be less than that if it's warmer. But, hold on, let me do this. But yeah, whether or not they will get male or female reproductive anatomy is based on whether it's warmer or colder during the incubation period. So when it's cooler, generally above, let me actually pull up the numbers here. I'll pull up the numbers in a minute, but there are different thresholds generally for when they'll predominantly be male or female. And there's a bit of a gray area as well. But, if it's warmer, then you'll have a higher proportion of female sea turtles coming from a nest. And if it's cooler, then you'll have a higher proportion of male sea turtles coming from a nest. So predictably, like if we then have what we're seeing is, if there's warmer weather or warmer conditions, the sand temperature is warmer, then we're seeing an increased hyperfeminization of the sea turtles that are, produced, of the, sea turtle hatchling output. So that means that a larger and larger proportions of sea turtles, the sea turtle population overall, is becoming female. Which, that's not necessarily, well, it is kind of a bad thing, but it's kind of a bad thing because then you have less, if there's a lot of females and only a handful of males, one, they have trouble finding each other in the first place. So you might not be able to have every female find a mate to be able to, get the eggs fertilized. But secondly, even if they do, there's a lot less genetic diversity. Because if there's a defect that, maybe one male has or something, or some sort of genetic weakness or just difference, in terms of phenotypes or genes, what are expressed, then that could make it make them more susceptible to, if there's some sort of environmental pressure or disease or whatever. There's less genetic diversity in the overall species, which is not good if there are other environmental stressors. So what it does, isn't necessarily always intrinsically bad, but it makes the species as a whole more vulnerable to other factors. So that's something that we are starting to see. We have also started to see some instances of, they've always kind of been there occasionally, but instances of hybridization between species, just because, those are the dudes you find out and about while you're looking for a mate. And, if it works mechanistically, then maybe it'll work. And sometimes it does. So, yeah. Let me, I'm gonna have to grab some different tiles so I can make this. Actually, maybe not. I am all over the place. My apologies. Okay, Greninja lives here, so I can't just willy-nilly, but I can clear this, which is... Maybe I'll put it here instead. I don't want to step on anyone's toes. Okay, so we need... Hold on a sec, everybody. Let me just do this real quick. Then I will get back to our regularly scheduled monologuing. Okay. So yeah, that's one of the ways that climate change, specifically warming, is affecting turtles, and why, their sex-based, their temperature-based sex determination can be a bit of an issue for them, or not work in their favor. And there may or may not be an ecological benefit to them evolving that way, but a lot of times that's the case for a lot of reptiles and amphibians. So that's just the way it is. So it's not necessarily that they didn't found on purpose. Sometimes it's just the way it is. And so that's just something sort of to bear in mind with this sort of thing. And it's not just sea turtles. A lot of other turtle species are like this as well. So let me find a fire type. But yeah, so sea turtles throughout their lives, I'll talk a little bit about that too. So they hatch, of course, they come out of their nests. They start out, fertilized, they go through certain periods. Generally they incubate for about, 2 months. During that time they go from, nothing, just cell conglomerates to, embryos to baby sea turtles. They gradually hatch, generally around the maybe 55 to 70 day mark after initially laying. Most of them will hatch, so they'll all be hanging out in the chamber. They won't immediately get out, but sometimes they'll crawl up to the top, they'll stick the little nose out and see what time of day it is, because they're so small that they cannot, if they try to go out during the day on the hot sand, they could fry. And so, did this work? No, it didn't. Okay. Let me try this. Nope. Okay. Or I could drink some water. Yeah, let me do that. So yeah, they'll peek their head up, see, if it's day or not, and then if it is, then they'll go back down and wait until nightfall. And generally what they'll do is just after the sun sets, or just as the sun is setting, that's when they will that's when they'll all come up in a group and all at the same time scurry out to the ocean as fast as possible. And generally, There's a lot of things that eat them, but by going out in a group, then statistically it's more likely that some of them will make it out to the ocean safely. And also at night there are fewer predators. You're not going to get as many shorebirds flying out and about. You might get some ghost crabs, maybe raccoons, but generally it's a little better. Especially if because they're fast. Like the time for when they all come out of the chamber initially, like emerge, to when they're all gone, can be about as quick as 5 minutes. They're booking because they need to be booking. So they go out to the water. From there, they swim out into the ocean. They ride the ocean currents. There's ocean currents that kind of go clockwise in the North Atlantic. And so that takes them up through the gyre there to the Sargasso Sea, where there are these giant floating mats of just algae and seaweed that are, replete with life. And so they go there and they forage. And generally they hang out there, swim around the ocean, forage there for decades. So the ones that make it and continue to survive, that's where they're hanging out. So they generally are there until they get close to reproductive age. And so let me figure out why this is not working. So needs 3 water and a waterfall. Alrighty. How can I do this? What would be a good way to do this? Let me... Sorry, we'll fix it. I might need your help more. But that's what they do as hatchlings. So then the juveniles are hanging out in the ocean, they're eating whatever. Generally, depends on the species, of course. Most species are omnivorous or carnivorous. Mostly omnivorous. So like for instance, loggerheads, they're more opportunistic in what they eat. They'll just eat kind of whatever is out there, and then most of it is like, seaweed, but also a lot of like the smaller, microorganisms, not micro, but, smaller organisms that live around in seagrasses, in seaweed, in seagrasses. So that could look like, shrimp or smaller fish or, certain insects. And then sometimes they will eat like grasses. So for instance, green sea turtles, they tend to forage, especially once they reach an older age, or a more mature age, on a variety of grasses and seagrass. And that can, of course, vary in the specific type of seagrass based on latitude. But, there's like eelgrass, zostera, which is, eelgrass, there's widgeon grass, there's, literally turtle grass in some tropical areas, which is aptly named because that's what turtles eat. So all those are things that they could eat. They're kind of, especially loggerheads, are very opportunistic. So, they also eat things like crustaceans too. So once they've kind of reached that point, they will... Let me actually scroll down a bit because I have my information here. Okay. What was that? So then there'll be juveniles, they'll do their thing for a while as... Is this gonna fly? Yeah, it'll fly, but I think I just displaced my apologies. I'll find it later. I'm gonna do this. So once sea turtles reach a reproductive age, they'll kind of end up closer to shore. They will find a mate, and the interesting thing about them is that they only really need to mate once, yeah, I mean, they only need to mate once. So, like, a female will be swimming around, she'll be looking for a mate, a male. They'll do their thing, and then they'll be able to hold on to the genetic material, you know, the male genetic material, you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. They'll hold on to it, and they can actually keep it viable and just use it to refertilize clutches of eggs. So they'll, like, produce a bunch of eggs in their body, use the sample to fertilize it, and then dump those eggs somewhere, and then create more eggs, use what's left over of the material to fertilize it. So they don't need to see the male again to continue having their kids, you know? But they will mate with a variety of different... They'll mate with multiple males over the course of their, you know, mating period. And generally, after doing that, so like a clutch, for instance, of sea turtle eggs, clutch is just another term of, like, you know, that's what's in a nest. There could be multiple fathers to the sea turtle. Wait, what are we doing? Okay, look that way. So interesting thing about that. So I mentioned before, they'll have a certain number, the turtles will come back and they'll lay their nests generally about every 2 weeks, because that's how long it generally takes for them to, in their bodies, to, like, physically produce another group of eggs. And they don't even really eat that much while they're in the nesting process. So what you'll see oftentimes is early in the sea turtle season, the females that come will be, like, pretty plump because they've been eating a lot, getting ready for their whole adventure of, you know, swimming around and laying nests. By the end, they're like these emaciated, worn out, like super skinny turtles because they've just used up a lot of their body fat and their energy to create all this stuff. It's very draining. That's why they can't do it every year. So that is kind of physiologically what happens to them during the whole process. So there's that, and then you live up there. How did you get here? Whatever. I can see flies. So that's what happens to them during the whole process, right? So by the time they're done, they are ready to be done, you know, and they'll go out, it'll take a few years to recover, and then they'll just come back and do their thing, you know, for as long as they live, I suppose, because I don't really think they go through, like, a menopause kind of thing. There isn't anything like that. They're viable to have offspring for their entire lives. So you'll see differences in, like, output, for instance, like some of the more experienced female turtles who've done this before, like when it isn't their first rodeo, they'll have larger outputs and maybe dig deeper nests and sort of stagger things better maybe than the neophytes, which that's just the way it is. That's, you know, people get more, everyone gets more experience as they, you know, experience things more. Duh. So that's that. And so once they're done, they'll go back out and just do their thing. They'll forage. You know, once they leave their nest, they are not coming back to check on it. You know, it's not like mammals or something like that, or birds, where they, like, handle the babies. They're kind of just like, all right, well, you know, that's life. You got to deal with it. So the hatchlings never immediately meet the parents, you know? Certainly never would have met the dad. But, you know, that's just whatever. So the sea turtle species, all 6 out of the 7 sea turtle species are ectothermic, meaning that individually they do not produce body heat. They cannot regulate their own body heat. So humans, if I go out in, like, the winter and it's cold, my body will maintain a homeostasis at about, you know, roughly 98.6 degrees, give or take. It could be different a little bit, but about that temperature. And I'm talking Fahrenheit. for my Celsius people, I'm so sorry, I don't know the conversion off the top of my head, but sea turtles don't have the ability to do that, with the exception of leatherback sea turtles. They have independently evolved the capacity to use countercurrent exchange with their blood vessels, so that they keep certain parts of their body warm, and they use that to warm other parts of their body. And so that is how they deal. So they can actually, they fare a little better in more northern areas with cooler climates because of that. Now, other sea turtles, they can't do that. They just never developed it. I don't know. It's chance. You know, it's not an active thing. I'm not choosing to evolve wings, so I'm not going to evolve wings. You know what I'm saying? So with that in mind, most sea turtle species, the other 6 cannot. And so because of that, they're, you know, subject to the whims of the environment. So if it's super hot, then their metabolisms will speed up, and they'll burn through their energy resources much faster than they would have otherwise. So that's what's happening a lot of times with these warmer summers for female sea turtles. You know, maybe they can't lay as many nests over the course of a summer because their bodies are working harder to just regulate, or just maybe it's warmer, and so they're burning through their fat reserves quicker. And when they run out of fat reserves, they don't have any more to give to develop eggs. So that'll reduce the number of potential offspring and the number of nests that they can have. And then the same is true for the individual hatchlings themselves. So the hatchlings are really interesting because, you know, humans, you know, when people are pregnant, they're attached to an umbilical cord, right? They get their nutrition from the parents. Like with eggs, if you look up an image, which I can include these too, but they have within the eggs, they'll have the yolk sacs that they're attached to their little belly button, turtle belly buttons, essentially. And they use that as like a source of nutrition and development when they're incubating. But even once they hatch, they still absorb the yolk sac into their bodies, and they use that energy from the initial thing there to have the energy to make it out to the deep ocean, where they find these sargassum mats and can find long-term food sources. Because generally they're not going to find what they're looking for just out and about, and it's kind of detrimental and costly in terms of time to be able to have to look for something to eat just while they're trying to scurry as far out to sea as they can. Because they don't want to be there. They want to be in a place where there's fewer predators out there in the wide open sea. And so the issue with that is that if they burn through their yolk sacs quicker because their metabolism is sped up because it's warmer in the water overall, or at least the surface water, then maybe they won't be able to go out as far. Maybe they'll run out of energy before they get out to the currents, ocean currents, or maybe to the sargassum mats. And that means fewer will make it to adulthood, which is also bad. So that's kind of one way that the warming temperatures are impacting the developing hatchlings and juveniles, as well as the adults. So another thing is that they are very sensitive to things. So the incubation temperatures, let me see if I can find the specific, okay. So the pivotal temperature for loggerhead sea turtles, Caretta, that is their scientific name, that's the name of this channel, is 28.74 degrees Celsius, where you'll generally that's where the 50-50 mark is. If you have a nest at that temperature, it'll be 50% male, 50% female. And it's like an S curve, essentially. So it's very drastic, going either direction from there. And if you go too far out of that range either way, then that's it. They all die. It's too hot or it's too cold. They don't make it. There's a very narrow temperature range that they can really exist in through incubation. Let me see if I even mentioned. Yeah, it's about 25 to 35 degrees Celsius. So Let me convert that to Fahrenheit to kind of give some perspective to both myself and to my American people. So that's about 77 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit is the range that they can be incubated and not die, or not all die. And then what was the other thing I said? It was 28.74, right? So that is the 50-50 temperature. And that's 83 degrees. So, but that's the sand. The sand can get pretty hot, right? That's why they dig down to a little bit deeper in the chamber where it's not quite as exposed. But still, if you have a super hot summer, later on in the year, the ground has been baking and baking for months on end, it's gonna get pretty warm, especially nowadays. So that could be bad news. So in a lot of more tropical areas, what we're seeing is that not only are there more and more females, they're much higher mortality rates overall. So where the tropics in the past maybe produced the bulk of the sea turtle populations that are out there supplying the oceans with sea turtles, now it's the more temperate zones that we're having to rely on more for sea turtles to sort of thrive, or at least be able to, that's where the sea turtles are having to come from. So that opens a whole other can of worms as to, is there enough habitat? So let me shut up for a sec and find the next thing to prepare for. So that is, Persian, okay. So Persian, 85. I probably won't touch upon everything in like this in terms of like sea turtle related stuff. But, I just think it's cool. So, Evil Organization HQ. Okay, I can do that. I think. Yeah, okay, cool. So right now, the current management efforts that are in place that we've been doing so far have been monitoring and data collection of sea turtles. So people, like what I did is I went out and patrolled the beach at night, so that was the monitoring. We collect genetic samples of sea turtles. And then we'd also sort of figure out how big the sea turtles were, estimates on how old they were, and people put tags on sea turtles. Sort of like if you go to a farm, you see like a goat or something with like a little earring, essentially, with a number on it. That's kind of what they put on tag. And this doesn't hurt the sea turtles, and it's just like going through kind of their like ends of their sort of like underneath their shell, not their shell, their flippers. It's sort of in like an area that's kind of like a nail, essentially. But it's through there, and it's a way for people to shiny stuff probably. What? He likes fire. I did not know that. But there's that. Another way is people have these little pit tags, so passive integrated transponders. These are little grains of rice kind of things. They use them in pets, so a lot of times they'll microchip pets, so that way if they get lost, the shelters can scan them to make sure that they're, not just a stray, that they belong to somebody. And that's another thing that we do, and that is minimally invasive to the turtles as well. Don't even have to puncture any skin or anything like that, which is kind of preferable. So there's that. That's helping with monitor because they give us an idea of who is this turtle, have we seen them before, where have we seen them before, and how are they related to other sea turtles that we've seen. In addition to that, there's rehabilitation and husbandry. Oftentimes, sea turtles, snums will get cold stunned as they're trying to get up north, but to ride the currents, but then it's too cold. Then their body will go into shock because their metabolism shuts down when it's too cold in the water. So it's the opposite of the heating issue that I mentioned before. They can't do anything. So when that happens, they'll generally wash ashore. Scientists in Massachusetts or places like that will find them, and then they'll bring them to either local or other areas where they will be rehabilitated, fed more food and nourished, and then once they're well enough, released back into the ocean. And this mostly happens with juveniles, but it can happen at pretty much any age to have a stranding event. Then lastly, we do nest protection. So that is another thing that I did, where it pertains to putting down screens, essentially, to reduce the amount of predation. So, raccoons and wild boars, for instance, could be the most detrimental to sea turtle habitats because they will just dig into a nest and just eat and eat and eat and eat. So putting down measures such as screens over it, it doesn't prevent the turtles because they're wide enough gaps for the hatchlings to crawl out of, but it does prevent predators from getting in. Coyotes are also a thing that eats them, by the way. So that's kind of the very basic stuff of what we as people have done so far to encourage the sea turtle species to improve their odds, to improve their livelihood. We can't obviously follow an individual hatchling out into the ocean and hang out with them for 30 years out in the ocean, and who knows where. We can't do that. We don't have the resources for that. Even if we could, logistically, it just doesn't make sense. And it'd be hard because there are a lot of hatchlings, So, that is, we only have so much control that we can do through direct management like that, because we are a terrestrial species. As humans, we are a terrestrial species, and we can't follow them around. So, yeah. You know what? I don't think I can make that. Yeah, the evil team thing. Or I don't have the rocket poster. But I can make a luxury sofa, right? I think. I can. Sweet. Okay, let's make one of these. And then I'll see if I can make the plants as well. I'm not sure if I have a recipe for that. Okay, I'm gonna have to use the 3D printer, which is fine. Okay. Yeah. Alright, so... yeah, that's what we do generally for monitoring or for management efforts. But of course, the bigger things at play, like climate change, that are now an issue. In addition to, education and outreach and reducing the mortality caused by bycatch in shrimp trawling or other commercial fishing. All those are ways that we can kind of reduce it. Poaching has been an issue in the past as well, where people would eat sea turtle eggs, which, again, that's something that's not really as prevalent now, at least in... it's not as prevalent, certainly in most places, but especially not in the U.S. It's not really a thing anymore, because it's illegal, among other things. But yeah, so 5-7 species have been observed nesting along U.S. coastlines, so loggerhead, green, leatherback, Kemp's ridley, and hawksbill. And there are management programs in most coastal states that, experience sea turtles in the U.S. But, the thing is, they aren't always, state-sponsored. So the areas of beach that are protected or have people, checking in on them, they don't always span the entirety of coastlines, so there are gaps. So for instance, I know, I don't think, to my knowledge, I could very much be wrong, but I don't know if there's that much stuff done around like Miami or directly around that, but there's a lot of stuff done on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and the Georgia has a state program, through the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. That's all very organized, and they get fewer sea turtles in general than Florida does, but the Georgia coastline, they do a very good job at monitoring and managing sea turtle species, and hatchlings, and mothers of nest too. And when I was talking about tagging, by the way, I mean for adults. You can't feasibly, it's not realistic to tag, hatchlings, because one, oftentimes even as the monitoring people, we're just not gonna find them. We can predict when a nest is going to hatch. We can even know when some of the turtles have started to come out of the chamber, but or not have come out, have begun to emerge from their eggs and are just hanging out in the chamber. But like, a turtle isn't necessarily going to come out the same night the day that it hatches. Some of them might, but they don't always. But then also they're not all going to hatch, they're not all going to hatch at once, they're not all going to emerge at once. And it happens so quickly that you obviously can't be, it's hard to be there exactly. And honestly, there's only so much that we can do as they're all coming into the ocean, just logistically. Do you want me to buy stuff for him? I'll check out your bears. Sure. You don't have much good stuff here, to be honest. I'm sorry, I support you, but yeah, I just don't know. Gotta get better wares. But things like the Endangered Species Act that was originally put out in 1973 has been really helpful to protect these. I mean, tons of species, not just sea turtles, but all sorts of species it's been a really great. So as I was saying, what was I saying? I don't know, basically that sea turtles, it's great that the Endangered Species Act is a thing and exists, and it has been very helpful. So something that we should protect. Now, going forward with that in mind, where did that go? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the individual species, particularly the ones that you'll find in the US, because if you're out on the beach at night, starting this time of year, you just might see one. And if you do, obviously, give it its space. Don't scare it off. They're very finicky. If they get spooked, they will be out of there. And that means that if they get spooked too much, eventually they'll just be forced to deposit their eggs somewhere out in the ocean. And then that's a waste, because then they'll all die, because the sea turtle eggs cannot be inundated. They're porous, the eggs themselves, which allows the turtles to breathe while they're incubating, right? But, obviously that's not always a good thing, because, what happens if water gets in there, if the egg chamber floods, that means they drown. So you don't want them dumping it off into the middle of the ocean, because they will drown. And that's just not ideal for them. So loghead sea turtles are the most abundant species in the United States. I wonder if I could build an elevator here. I probably could. They are about 2.5 to 3.5 feet long, generally. And they can weigh anywhere from around, as adults, around 150 to upwards of about 400 pounds. So they are hefty, let me tell you that. Here we go. Oh, shoot. So there are different, what we call recovery units. So recovery units, let me see if I can actually make sure, because I want to be, it's a trick, sort of a different, so there's regional management units. So those are within an area, there are different groups of sea turtles. So loggerheads can be found almost everywhere throughout the world, right? But they're the sea turtles that primarily nest along the eastern coast of the United States are a totally different group of sea turtles than the ones that nest, say, in Australia. Even if they interact with each other in the ocean, even if they meet each other, they're not the same turtles, because sea turtles have a lot. Natal homing is really important for sea turtles. Generally, it's the kind of mentality that, oh, if it worked for my parents, then it worked. If it worked for me, then it'll work for my offspring. In terms of like where I want to lay a nest, so they'll go back to lay a nest generally where they came from, right? So, there are different regional management units, and those regional management units can further be broken down into what we call recovery units. So, for instance, in the United States, or along the eastern United States, there's the Northern Recovery Unit, which is like everything, the sea turtles that nest from like the bottom of Georgia, maybe very top of Florida, upwards to about, probably North Carolina for the most part. You're not really, for sea turtle nests to really be like sustainable, or for nesting to be worthwhile in a certain area, the beaches themselves have to hit a certain temperature for a certain period of time throughout the warmer months of the year. And you're generally not going to get that as much. And then also because turtles have a strong preference for where they lay their nests, they'll generally go where they're used to. So, for instance, in Virginia Beach, you might get like a sea turtle nest, like 5 a year, maybe, sometimes less. And then Maryland will sometimes get like one every couple years. But for the most part, it's only going to be like the very southern Outer Banks and south from there. But there's the recovery unit from North Carolina down to Georgia. And then there's also the Peninsula Florida Recovery Unit. So, along the peninsula of Florida itself, there's the Northern Gulf of Mexico Recovery Unit, the Greater Caribbean Recovery Unit, and there's sort of like recovery units or groups of turtles as well that nest on the dry tortugas. So that's one of the national parks. If you're familiar with if you know your stuff about national parks, that is a military base that was used, in the past, and exists, sort of out in the Gulf near Key West, off of Key West. So all those are the groups that kind of we break the loggerheads down into, or at least the North Atlantic loggerheads into, just, because they're different species and helps with management and sort of organizing stuff. So they're vulnerable overall. They are listed as like a least concern. So they're vulnerable, but they're not like about to go extinct at any moment, and that's because of the good effort that so many people have put through, and the priorities that we've made with legislation. We've been helping the problem, or not helping the problem, we have been fixing the problems of poaching and people interfering with sea turtles, and we've been increasing the overall numbers of these sea turtles that are out in the wild because we have been giving them the best chance they can get, that we can reasonably give them with the resources that we have, right? And sometimes there's a bit of a delay with that, right? Because they live for so long. It'll take 30 years for you to start seeing bang for your buck because it takes that long for them to actually reach adulthood, and then produce more offspring, right? So, but it's an investment. That's the way a lot of these things are. And it's not just investment for the loggerheads, it's in the sea turtles in general, it's investment for everything that eats them. These entire terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems that rely on sea turtles. So, it's not just, oh, we like these turtles because they're cute and charismatic. They are. But it's more than that. It's helpful to providing stability and food sources and, ecological soundness for a lot of different things out there, which is crucial, just for making sure that we can help to, the status quo is going to be rocked regardless, right? But especially by things like climate change. But what we want to do is give it its best chance of finding the opportunity to be able to adapt to things as they come. Ooh, well, that was fast. So, like I said before, if they're opportunistic, they will eat kind of whatever is available. So, like, for instance, generally the ones that forage around, like, Virginia, Maryland, places like that, they'll eat a lot of horseshoe crabs, which are not very beneficial. Like, these are the adults eat what they eat. Goodness, what a graceful little greeting. Colored me impressed. I must say, I'm slightly saddened that your bow was more elegant than mine, but I want to hold it against you. Alright, well. Oh, the gem glows. I didn't know that. With all the grace and elegance of a proud queen. What if it's a dude? Is it like a drag queen then? Yeah. Alright, won't be needing this anymore. So, they're a little elevator, so she is not stuck down here. So they'll eat kind of whatever's available, even if it's not necessarily the most nutritious for them, which, I mean, that's just what has worked in the past, but of course you could see how that could be a problem when it's like, oh, is this a jellyfish? This looks so good, but it's actually a piece of trash floating around. So, you know, it's not always a great thing that they developed this, or that as animals they have this tendency. And it's not just like a flaw unique to sea turtles. I mean, I used to have a golden retriever. Unfortunately, she passed away in early 2025, which sucks. But, you know, she was old, so it happens. It's life, unfortunately. But, you know, she kind of ate whatever was interesting to her. And sea turtles can be the same way. If it looks like a fish or a jellyfish especially, that's what they will eat. So that's how they eat plastic or plastic bags or balloons or things like that. And of course, plastic is another thing that it's not like the biggest imminent threat to sea turtle well-being, but it's bad. We don't want it out there in the ocean because they'll have all these plastic obstructions in their guts. And then, you know, of course, that is lethal if it blocks their digestive system, because I wouldn't want, you know, my digestive system filled with plastic and to be, you know, constipated and everything like that. It's just not gonna work. It's balanced. So anyway, that's one of the major ways that can be lethal for them, but that kind of goes to show like how their opportunistic sort of tendencies can be a detriment at times. But it's also, in a way, it is still good because it means that, you know, let's say as things get warmer and there are fewer types of prey available, then it's easier for them to go somewhere else, adapt to that food source. So they actually, of all the sea turtle species, they generally are the most resilient. And just because they're most abundant in the US, they're kind of the center of a lot of conservation efforts here. Not to say that we don't do things to try to maintain and protect other species, but that's just because it's by virtue, like, that's what's there. That's what we can take care of. So, is this... Oh. Alright, I need some more ladders. Here we go. So that's that's loggerhead sea turtles. The other ones that you'll see a lot if you're walking around, especially in Florida, loggerheads are primarily they're the ones that they exist in a slightly more northern range than green sea turtles, just due to niche they're adapted for. Green sea turtles, you'll find them more if you hit Florida or so, and they are bigger. They have loggerheads. They have these big hefty heads, and they're sort of a dark mottled kind of almost yellowish skin, and then their carapace, which is another name for their shell. That's a pretty big bulky hefty thing with dark colored. Green sea turtles have more of a patterned shell that kind of looks like sort of sun rays exploding outward. They are, more green generally. They're called green turtles in part because the grasses that they eat color their body, like parts of their body, their organs, a green color, give them sort of greenish hue. So they're the second most abundant species nesting along the U.S. They also have very small heads and kind of like the almond-shaped eyes. They are an adapted feeder. So other populations of green sea turtles have been known to, consume. Yeah, it's right. That's why. Other groups of green sea turtles in other parts of the world have been known to consume, have an omnivorous diet. However, the green sea turtles that forage and nest along the North Atlantic, they have evolved to be mostly herbivorous. So they're the ones eating primarily seagrasses, at least as adults, in their diets. And this is just due to competition with other sea turtles, other species, as well as, that's it. So they're currently listed as endangered. They're more threatened than loggerheads. And they are a bit bigger than loggerheads. They can be up to about, 3.5 feet and weigh around 400 pounds as well. So if you look at them side by side, you can easily tell them apart. That's the thing with sea turtle species. They're pretty distinctive. Other species that nest in the U.S. Are leatherbacks, these are the big ones. I mentioned before that they are endothermic because they are able to regulate their own internal body temperatures, which is really cool. But they are critically endangered. They are very rare. You'll only really get a handful. They're also the biggest species of sea turtle. So they can be as big as a car, literally a small car. It's awesome. I really have always wanted to see one, but I just never have. And they're genetically distinct from the rest of them. They've actually, if you look at their phylogenetic tree, then they specifically, it's like you have a branch going off, and then it splits in two, and one becomes the leatherback sea turtles, and the other splits into 6 different ones, essentially, that it's more complicated than that, but basically into 6 different ones that are the other 6 sea turtle species. So they are genetically distinct from the rest of the sea turtle species. They're, they're like pygmies, but they're not, because they're actually advantageous and kind of more resilient. Well, resilient in some ways, not in others. But they're endothermic, so they can regulate the body temperature. They can be more than 6 feet long and weigh anywhere between 500 to 1,500 pounds. So they eat jellyfish and other sort of salps, which let me I want to make sure I'm doing this in a way that's so a salp is a small barrel-shaped gelatinous marine invertebrate. So it's a clear kind of jellyish thing, kind of like jellyfish, and that is what they eat. So in addition to that, there are Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, and they are more common in South Texas and along the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm using that. Don't come for me, but that is what it's historically been called. I'm just going to call it that. Apologies. Gulf, whatever. So in the U.S., it's limited to Florida and Texas. They have a very unique behavioral adaptation, where, most turtles, they'll come at night because, again, the adults, when they do that, they don't want to be harassed by shorebirds or people or whatever else. So there are fewer predators out and about at night, right? Especially that are going to mess with an adult sea turtle as she's trying to lay a nest. So the Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, they'll just come up whenever. But instead of one singular sea turtle coming up to just do their thing and go back to the ocean, all of the females will come up at once, simultaneously. So you'll have events where like hundreds of turtles are crawling up the beach, digging nests, and then like doing their thing. So these are called arrabada events, sort of named for like the Spanish arrabadas. But that's when they all come in, and that is advantageous because let's say you're a wild boar trying to come in and eat sea turtle nests. Yeah, you know, it's easy pickings there, but even if you eat one nest, you can't eat 100 nests at once. You just can't fit that in your stomach, and logistically, they're gonna have the nest covered and gone and disguised before you get to them. So that greatly reduces the number of, like, the amount of predation that the nests are subject to. So that is a really interesting way of preventing or lowering mortality rates. But the arrabada behavior is limited to Mexico, while you will find Kemp's Ridley sea turtles in other parts of the world and other, you know, in the United States themselves. They don't exhibit the same arrabada behavior. And their shell, their carapace, which is like the turtles, the back of their shell. So if a turtle's lying flat on the ground, its back, like the, you know, dome, that's called the carapace. Whereas underneath the chest, that would be called the plastron. And the carapace is circular. They, green Kemp's Ridley sea turtles have a very distinctive pointy beak, and they are listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List. So let me make sure. So the ICUN Red List is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. International sort of monitoring the overall well-being of different endangered species. So they're listed as critically endangered, which, you know, it's important. And part of the reason why they're critically endangered is because they are unique to the Gulf area. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. That is just where they nest, and that's that. So because of that, if they lose their habitat, they don't have anywhere else to go because they're adapted to that specific range. And then the fifth type of sea turtle species that you could potentially find in the United States are the hawksbill sea turtles, and they are also critically endangered. Their federal status in the U.S. is listed as endangered. They have another very distinctive pointy beak, and a very colorful, pretty carapace. Look up pictures online. It's like something out of the patterns are incredible. But they're carnivorous and they eat mostly sponges. Whoa, a human. I was just wondering where all the humans went. What, you're not human? They've all gone off somewhere? Yeah, get with the program. That makes me sad. This one's had tons of nice black smoke. Ugh. See, this is what we should not be doing, the black smoke, because contributing to climate change. This dude likes it, but like, that's what's causing global temperatures to rise, because we have more carbon and methane and greenhouse gases going up the atmosphere, you know? So, anyway, in fictional Pokemon world, who cares? But in the real world, it's important that we don't. So, let's talk a little bit about, oh, that's a great segue. Oh my gosh. Because the next part of my sort of thing, notes that I have, is with regards to climatic warming. So a lot of components of sea turtle biology and life history are optimal within really only a very narrow thermal range. So we need to understand the mechanisms of how sea turtles are impacted by warming, because that'll be very helpful in actually informing, management in the future and see what we can do to try to protect them. And again, like, yes, there's the Darwin survival of the fittest, so if they're gonna die, they're gonna die, but like, what we are doing to the environment is not natural. So trying to save them, that doesn't seem like that's within reason, because it's also You could claim that what people are trying to do for management purposes isn't natural, but what's happening to them in the first place is not natural. And also, at the end of the day, we can only do so much, but we can do things to try to slow or reduce the damage that is done. So, hatchlings and juveniles, first of all. As this warming temperatures, aside from the whole gender skew thing, or sex skew thing, it very much is huge for hatchlings overall, because even as they're incubating, when it's too warm, if it doesn't straight up cause mortality, it can change the morphology of the embryo. So morphology is like their physical body. So when it's too warm, they won't develop properly due to, certain, let's see. So for instance, humans, we don't want to get a fever of you want to go to the hospital once if you have a fever, you're sick, and it spikes up to 104. You want to go to the hospital because there are proteins within the cells in our body that will denature, that is, lose their shape when it's too hot. And this is irreversible. Once it happens, they can come back. And when the proteins lose their shape, these amino acids and such, they can't perform the valuable functions that they were able to do before. So, and they won't be able to do it again once they do it. It's like a one-way thing. It's like you boil pasta, you can't make the pasta like this soggy noodle, the stringy whatever thing. You can't put it back into the straight and rigid thing that it was before. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of the way it works with proteins. So when that happens, the proteins with sea turtles, the proteins denature, their flippers and things like that can be misshapen. And because it's so imperative that hatchlings, sea turtle hatchlings and juveniles, are able to get out to the ocean as fast as they can so they can avoid predators and avoid running out of energy from their yolk sac. If their flippers are misshapen, they aren't going to be able to swim as well or attain the same velocity or ease of access, and so they will have a higher resulting mortality rate, right? So, and beyond that, it's not just the physical shape, it also affects their motor function, and their neurological connections. So that will reduce the rate of recruitment, and recruitment is like recruiting. It's like recruiting for something. It's how many of these hatchlings are going to be able to go out and be recruited into the ocean to join the potential list of sea turtles that are out there. And sidebar, for the Northern Recovery Unit that I mentioned before, sea turtles, we actually, at this point, aside from the neophytes that come out, they've, with all the genetic, other tagging studies that they've done before, they have a general idea of exactly how many sea turtles there are out in the Northern Recovery Unit, so we know, we have a very clear idea, which is awesome. And, it's really great for us because it gives an idea of what we're working with. What are the population sizes out there? How does that compare to what things were before? So I just think that's really cool. And that's not true everywhere because in some areas, like the Northern Recovery Unit, it's pretty big, but it's the Florida sea turtle, the Peninsula Florida sea turtle species is the biggest recovery unit, I believe, in the United States. So logistically, it wouldn't be quite as easy to get samples for all of them. But it's something that we try at least tagging, so that way at least we know where this turtle is in the system somewhere. So yeah, so let's see. Warming can also affect the initial seaward crawl. I talked about energy expenditures before in their yolk sac. It has an impact on that. And then another thing, warming temperatures, a lot of the ocean itself. The reason why we have ocean gyres and why the overall ocean currents flow clockwise in the ocean. So you have the trade winds and other sort of winds that push southwards towards the equator. And then you have the Gulf Stream, for instance, that goes up the US and then past Maine up to Europe. That is the Gulf Stream, right? And that's part of the reason why Europe, Western Europe, is habitable, because it's taking all this warm air from, essentially starting from the Caribbean, this warm water and resulting warm air all the way up as far north as, Ireland, England, France, Spain, etc. And so the tricky thing is that if you have the melting of glaciers, if you have the warming overall, that's going to change. It's going to make parts of the ocean warmer, parts of the ocean cooler. It's going to make parts of the air warmer, parts of the air resulting cooler. And so that'll just totally shift and, to a certain extent, just straight up nullify the entirety of, ocean circulation, or at least, the current systems that are in place. And that's a problem, because if the ocean currents weaken, then the turtles can't ride those currents out into the ocean. So in Finding Nemo, for instance, they talk about, the EAC, the East Australian Current. They ride those systems to be able to take advantage of it, because turtles, they're pretty cool, they're great swimmers, but it takes a lot of energy to swim all the way around the Atlantic, right? So they make use of these currents, just like when we use a sailboat, we make use of winds, because it's more energy to use a motor or some sort of gas or whatever. And that means that they can't reach certain foraging sites, or certain areas could be more patchy or have higher densities of potential turtles, or they'll consume all the food sources within a given area, and then they won't be able to get to another place quick enough to be able to sustain their needs. And so that'll depend on species and diet, how much they're affected by that, but it is still something that is sort of a snowball, like it's a snowball effect, but kind of like a side effect of the whole warming phase. And so then the adults, the warming affects them, because some species are more resilient to environmental fluxes. But, with the hyperfeminization, you're going to have less genetic diversity. And then, we're seeing the issues where I talked about natal homing. So natal homing is really interesting, because different sea turtle groups have different degrees of natal homing. So the Northern Recovery Unit, for instance, along Georgia and all that, their natal homing is not as strong as it is for, Florida or whatever. So if a Florida turtle, say, nests, let's say Sarasota. I don't know. Let's say a turtle comes up and nests near Sarasota. I don't even know if Sarasota is on the coast. I think it is. And then, that turtle, 3 years will come back. If it hatches, emerges from there, it might come back exactly to that pinpoint within, a mile or so of where it came from, because they have very strong natal homing. And the way that natal homing works is that it relies on the geomagnetic fields of the Earth. So we know north and south, right? And there's essentially geomagnetic lines that tell the latitude that these animals of all types, not just sea turtles, are able to hone in on by using these little crystals that are in their brains that are able to, like a compass, react and point towards the direction of the poles. So they use that as a frame of reference so that they can get back to where they were, which is honestly so cool. But they use that to get home. But the sea turtles that, say, nest in Florida, for instance, they are more specific about where they go back to, whereas the sea turtles that maybe nest along, the Georgia coastlines, they're a little more flexible. So what they might do, instead of going to a specific place, like Florida turtles, I mentioned that they'll come back and maybe nest every 2 weeks over the course of a summer. One sea turtle, she might go, nest at a specific beach, go back, hang out in the ocean for a while, nest at a specific beach 2 weeks later. The turtles in more northern parts, the Northern Recovery Unit, they might just ride the Gulf Stream and start swimming down, drop a nest in northern Florida, drop a nest maybe a couple weeks later in Georgia somewhere, drop a nest in northern Georgia, drop a nest in South Carolina, drop a nest in North Carolina, and then they're done by that point, so they swim right back out to sea. And so in that regards, there are pros and cons to each sort of strategy, but that just goes to show that different groups of turtles have different even nesting behavior. Um, and so the thing is, if you have a high nesting site fidelity, it can be good in cases where this, like, if this site is great, it's perfect beaches, it worked for me as a sea turtle, so it's got to work for my kids. Maybe so. But let's say that the beach, over the course of, I don't know, 30 years, 50 years, between when the mother turtle hatched, back in my day, and when the mother turtle actually is laying eggs, let's say the temperature increases by, I don't know, 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which in a lot of areas it has. Or maybe the sea level rises because this is like a very low elevation. Then suddenly the beaches aren't as sustainable for sea turtle life or hatchling life anymore. You incubate there, you might get they might drown, or it might be too hot, and then it'll become more female, or just straight up cooked, fried eggs in the fried eggs because they just can't deal. I guess hard-boiled eggs would be. Anyway, I'm not gonna use that metaphor. But it's totally reasonable for that sort of change now because of what we're doing to the environment happen over 50. Like, it's totally reasonable for that to happen over the course of the 50 years at this point. Which is big because it means that in these areas with very high nesting site natal homing, it might be their undoing of these populations. If they go back and they assume, because they're hardwired to assume that this must work for them, so it'll work for their kids, and it doesn't work for their kids because it's not the same environment as it was when they grew up or when they hatched, that could just end the lineage right there because they're not going to make it. So, too bad. Suck to suck. So in that respect, maybe the Northern Recovery Unit could be a little more resilient because they're traveling northward. So yeah, maybe the southern nests that they lay could be too hot. But maybe like I don't know, by the time they get up to like South Carolina or North Carolina, it won't be too hot. So that'll still work. And they're varying up their latitude and location. So again, that provides the opportunity. It's a similar concept to higher genetic diversity. The differences in behavior allows more of an opportunity for error. So yeah, I mean, it's possible that in the future, the sea turtles that are able to adapt or perhaps exhibit more of a less specific natal homing or natal site fidelity will actually fare better and might even change their behavior, if possible, to nest in further northward areas. So we could start seeing more in, I don't know, North Carolina or Virginia, given that there are actual beach habitats that still exist and are not just covered by water, because that's another issue. Alright, let me check the next Pokédex thing. I'm doing this at a snail's pace. Alright, Ghastly, right? Spooky Study. I can do that. But yeah, so climate change, if you haven't gleaned that information from all the rambling I've done so far, climate change is definitely going to affect sea turtle populations. And obviously sea turtle populations are not the only things. They're not maybe necessarily not even the most important thing that'll be affected by climate change. But they will be affected by climate change. And we as people need to be able to figure out ways to deal with that. And especially to prepare for that in ways that we can. Because we can't fundamentally stop or reverse climate change with the technology we have right now. But we can do things currently to, improve the outlook. Alright, so I'm looking at Haunter and Ghastly. So Haunter has a habitat called Surprise in store with a jack-in-the-box looking thing. And Ghastly likes a spooky study, like I saw. So let's see. I'll probably cut forward to this after I do a bit more, because I am going at a snail's pace. I think I've only done 4 or 5 habitats. But yeah, so essentially that's kind of the gist of what's going on so far with sea turtle stuff. Another sort of manifestation of climate change is tropical storms. So there's basically, again, I studied environmental science, but I'm not a meteorologist, so I don't know everything about it. But I will say that warmer temperatures are able to carry, there's this concept of something called moist static energy, which is the amount of energy that humid air can hold. And by energy, I mean like more water. So, if you go outside in summer, it's hot and muggy. Or like if you look at, for instance, pull up your phone right now, and go to weather, and you go down and find the dew point. And the dew point is if the temperature in the air went down to that's when it would cool enough that the water in the air would precipitate out and fall as rain, right? And so warmer air can hold more and more moisture. So colder air, like in the winter, a lot of times that's when your skin will get dry, where you'll have issues with that sort of thing. That's because it can't hold as much moisture in the air. So the way that works is, if you don't live in the tropics, you're probably familiar with hurricanes, right? Or cyclones, tropical cyclones. And those, are a big deal for turtles, especially the ones that live in more temperate regions, such as loggerheads. So in recent years, they've gotten more intense, and there are more. So higher temperatures overall, they let the air can hold more moisture. And so when there's more moisture in the air, it's easier for that to collect a sort of energy, and it creates bigger storm systems that, as they cool, as they go northward, they hold more water and then they dump more water as they cool off. Tropical storms start out kind of around the just maybe north or south of the equator, and then they spiral north or south from there. So for instance, if you live, for my people who live in the US, what you'll probably see for a lot of the hurricanes that say hit the East Coast, they'll start around the Sahara, go from the dry desert area there, collect, go across the Atlantic, spin upwards through the Caribbean, pass up along there, and then go out into the north towards England. That's generally the overall general trajectory of things, right? So that's kind of course, as it hits all these coastal areas, that's prime habitat for sea turtle species. And because of warmer weather overall, there's a whole range of different conditions that have to be met for tropical cyclones, especially hurricanes, to really start occurring on a regular basis. One of those requirements is ocean surface temperature. And it has to hit about 75 degrees Fahrenheit for that. So because of warming, because the ocean is generally now warmer for longer periods of the year, we've extended the periods of the year where it's possible to get a hurricane in the first place, right? So because of that, and because the increases in moist static energy, because these systems can now hold more water and then produce more rain from that, cyclonic activity is expected to increase in both severity and frequency. So that's more storms, and when they do happen, they will be harsher because there's just more water in it, more energy. Let's see, I need to make sure I'm building the right things here. I think I need a candle as well. Yeah, that should work. And then I need a table. Sorry, I need to get with the program here because I'm getting distracted. So when greater levels of precipitation get to the groundwater, like the air, the ground can only really, or at least surface, can only hold so much water before it just can't anymore. And just anything that comes down is just flooding, adding from the top. So if you Let me think of a good way to like put this. So let's say you have a box of sand, a sand tray, if you will. And then you go to the sink and you fill it with water. And the sand is dry, but it's able to absorb some water. And you put more water in, and it's more moist, but it just absorbs that water. Eventually, you reach a point where there's so much water that it's not going to be absorbed anymore. It's just going to create a layer of water starting from the top of the sand, going upwards from there. That is what happens on a larger scale when a storm system hits the coast or hits any sort of, land, terrestrial area. And so if you have higher amounts of precipitation over time in lesser amounts, groundwater will absorb, the ground will absorb most water. That's how we then get, the water that we drink. A lot of it comes from groundwater. But if you dump too much water at once, then it'll flood more and flood to higher levels. So once the groundwater is saturated, that is like the ground is holding as much water as it can. So we'll have greater levels of precipitation, and that'll cause saturation to happen much quicker. And then resulting from that, much higher flooding levels, which on the coast makes things worse for erosion, and as the coastlines kind of become damaged. And then storm surge. Storm surge is and this can happen when it's raining or even when it's not raining. But essentially, it's when there's like a surge of water from the ocean, kind of like a tidal thing, essentially, like the tides, but not a tsunami, but like a tidal kind of thing, where the overall water will kind of be brought sort of almost on land. We're expected to have that in more extreme conditions. And that's bad news for turtles because most sea turtle nests can only withstand inundation, that is water going over the nest, once or twice perhaps, if it's minor. But if it gets totally flooded, like I mentioned before, they'll just drown. Like, that's the end of story. And so that is the issue with a lot of areas now. If we have harsher tropical storms that carry more energy and more resulting rain, and there's an extended opportunity for hurricane formation, more and more nests will either be drowned or straight up swept out to sea. And if you look at pictures such as like before and after of coastal hurricanes, you'll see, what it looks like on the beaches. It's bad. And like in the past, a lot of times this hurricane season wouldn't really start until maybe September or so. So by then, pretty much all the nests have already been because it takes that long for the ocean to heat up, right? By then, most nests, if not all of them, in areas will just be done. They'll have hatched already, they'll be gone, so it doesn't matter. It's not that harmful to the sea turtle population. But now that we've extended hurricane season into, May, June, July, August, maybe even April sometimes, essentially any of that is fair game for hurricanes. So that's like the entirety of sea turtle season, right? And so that means that any nest at any time could be potentially, not always, but hit with a hurricane, which is bad news because that'll again increase the mortality rate for sea turtles, because any nest at any time could be swept out to sea. Ooh, wall monitor. So that's one way that warming is affecting the actual precipitation that we're having, and that will affect shorelines, including sea turtle nests. Gotta punch this thing, don't want to get ahead of myself. So loggerheads are probably expected to be most affected by these things because they tend to inhabit more temperate zones. The more tropical turtles don't experience hurricanes. Tropical cyclones, part of what it's a complicated thing that I don't really want to get into now, and I probably can't get into now because I need to remember on some of the stuff that I studied through my environmental science degree. But basically, there's an element of latitude and the curve, like elevation, the Earth rotating, and the actual I think even the geomagnetic poles have like a connection to the strength of hurricanes. And so they, for whatever reason, like cyclones like that, they can't really cross the equator. They can't. Because of that, they don't really exist in the tropics. They only exist in areas at a mid to higher latitude. And granted, at the higher latitudes, they don't have as much, it's not as sustainable for them. They don't have as much energy and intensity, but that's where you'll find them. So the turtles that exclusively nest in the tropics, they won't have to deal with hurricanes and cyclonic behavior as much, just because of the way the whole thing works. That's not to say they won't experience precipitation, because precipitation, of course, happens in the tropics too, but that's just one type of precipitation. And that can affect turtles of all ages, not just hatchlings, because, adults and juveniles and other, turtles that maybe aren't able to just like swim underneath, deep under the surface, or hang out there for a while during, lots of maelstroms and, tides and hurricanes and stuff. They'll get swept around, and that could strand them, or that could bring them out to sea somewhere they don't want to be. So while it's not quite as detrimental to the overall population as maybe the hatchling nests getting flooded, that is just the egg chambers being flooded, it is still impactful to them too. Alright, so I did that. Oh, I need to actually do what I came here to do. No. Ah, man. Where should I put them? You know what? I'll put Ghastly and Haunter. Let's put them in the museum. I think they'd like that. So then another element of, like, side effect, I suppose, of just straight up warming, global warming, and climate change is sea level rise, which I'm sure people are familiar with that. If we're melting things, there's essentially two types of sea level rise, or ways that the sea levels can rise. So the first is like the one that most people know, we're melting the Arctic and the Antarctic, the glacier, because it becomes pushed over the threshold of 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius to the point where it is now, it melts. And that's water that goes from ice. Water will then, raise the overall ocean levels. Cool. We're aware of that. The other component of that is thermal expansion on a molecular level. So, atoms themselves and molecules will actually expand outward in warmer conditions. So, for instance, the reason why water goes from solid to liquid to gas is because on a smaller level, the actual water molecules are expanding outward. So, in warmer conditions, even if they don't actually switch between states of matter, they still expand outward more. So there's a thermal expansion by a small amount that occurs in addition to just the straight up more water in the ocean. And so that also contributes to sea level rise. So the last IPCC report in 2023 basically stated that there is, by the year 2100, we have the potential for sea level rise of 1 meter. And by 2300, we have the potential for sea level rise by up to 7 meters. Which, I mean, again, first thought is 7 meters, that's 1 meter, 2100, that's about 3 feet, right? And then 7 meters, 2300, that's about that's maybe 21 feet or so. So that kind of sounds like a lot. But in the grand scheme, who cares? You go far away from the coast and it's suddenly you're 1,000 feet up, right? No, not necessarily, because again, it's an average. But for coastal areas, that is huge, because most major human civilizations exist within, I think it's something like 100 feet of the sea. I don't know. Very close to the actual oceans themselves. And because of that, there's going to be a lot of flooding. It's going to impact human populations, of course, in a major way. But also it's going to affect sea turtles. Let's say worst case scenario happens, we get maybe a, I don't know, 21-foot elevation. That's covers pretty much all beaches in the US. And beaches are the kind of thing, yeah, they can move like up and down the coast. They can move on a lateral way, but it takes much more time for them to move inland or outland because you have to have the sediment itself be picked up and carried or eroded, or you have to break down these surfaces that are like rocks or dirt or whatever to be able to create these beach sort of habitats. And if we have impermeable surface such as, concrete, cities and stuff, you can't have that natural ebb and flow of the coastlines that you would have before. So when that happens, that's especially bad for areas like New Orleans, for instance, exists technically below sea level. And then Florida, I think it only really gets up to an elevation of like maybe 6 feet at most throughout all of Florida, the state of Florida, which for them, that's bad news because that is definitely, even by 2100, that's not good. That's not really habitable. Most of Florida will be unavailable. And that's also bad news for the turtles because that's where most of the, American turtles rely on to lay their nests. Here, let me actually get this thing out and stop talking. I'll shut up for a sec. Over here, yeah. And then, you know what? I think I'd rather put this here. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a big deal. And even though, if you live in, Colorado, then maybe you're like, who cares? Which, okay, fine, that's valid. But, if that's the case, maybe that works for you. But these people who are displaced from their homes elsewhere, they're still gonna have to find a place to live. And they might end up trying to knock on your door for a place to live. So it's just a whole, it's a sequence of events. But back to turtles. If you're on the beach, maybe the beach is, 50 feet wide, and the ocean causes it, is rising, so you lose, maybe 25, 30 feet of feet of width. And then you can't move landward because there's, a sidewalk and a town right there. Then you're having basically what they call a squeeze, a habitat squeeze. And thereby reducing the even amount of surface area that is viable and available for turtles or any, beach animals to live on. So that sucks, and even if you don't care about them, I want to be able to, if I go to the beach, I want to be able to actually go on the sand, right? So, anyway, in addition to that, there's a factor called glacial rebound. Again, and this is a complex thing, but if you live on the East Coast, then you're probably familiar with Chesapeake Bay. So the Chesapeake Bay, that area is actually sinking as the rest of, as the ocean levels are rising. And this occurs due to the fact that in the past... Hello? Oh, come on, man. What? Did that not work? Alright, fine, I'll find a fire type. This occurs because, up north there are glaciers and kind of there's tectonic plates, essentially, but beyond that, they're masses of land, that kind of all exist kind of in a platform or whatever. And so glaciers in the past, when they existed in a larger scale, kind of compressed parts of the land downward. And when these are removed, or due to regular, some of it's natural, some of it's human caused, when these glaciers melt, they release the pressure on the ground, which causes those areas in, say, the northeast to rise locally. But if it's attached to land in the southeast or mid-Atlantic, which is the Chesapeake Bay region, that'll sink because it'll then be propelled the other direction. So that's kind of a very like bare bones, unscientific way of explaining glacial rebound. But if that's sinking while sea levels are rising and the ocean is thermally expanding, that all adds up, which is bad news for turtles. And while turtles don't really nest a ton in the Chesapeake Bay, maybe the Chesapeake Bay could be, potential new habitat for them if they were to have to try to go northward to find more habitat over time. So that means that the turtles that are trying to find refuge in slightly cooler areas up north, suddenly there's nowhere to go anymore. So that could be problematic. And then, of course, just regular flooding causes nest inundation, lower survivorship, and then there are factors such as like seagrass meadows, which first of all, seagrasses are awesome. They're so cool. They're so valuable to so many animals. But I mentioned before that green sea turtles, like that's their jam. They love seagrasses. It's their pizza or whatever. Like whatever your favorite food is, that's what it is to them. They're adapted to use seagrasses as their primary food source. But seagrasses can only really exist within a certain thermal threshold, and because they also photosynthesize, and because they're plants, they need to photosynthesize, and light can only permeate down to a specific, within a certain range, or depth. There's a very specific locations to where these seagrasses can even exist. And if sea level rises, then those will have to shift. And maybe they can shift. But again, that could take time, and a lot of seagrass populations, when coupled with warming and depth, a lot of times they won't be able to be sustainable. So, for instance, along the mid-Atlantic, Zostra, which is called eelgrass colloquially, that is the most abundant, right? But it's dying off or not as sustainable or hardy because it's getting warmer. So we're seeing influxes of grasses such as widgeon grass, which is rupia in the scientific name. We're seeing some more of that. So can I borrow you? Actually, you're a fire type, right? So we're seeing some more of that come up. And so some grasses might just be replaced by another type of grass that is viable. Oh shoot, you can't get on that. Okay. Well, that's fine. I'll just grab a score button. Others, sometimes there'll be locations where there is no replacement grass, or where there's no backup plan, essentially. Which is bad news for the turtles that require something there. Or they can't, or they go back to the specific foraging areas that they're used to, but they cannot find a place to actually, they can't find what they're looking for or accustomed to eat. So that could potentially reduce these turtles that have evolved over time to feed on a very specific niche of food, like herbivory, might not be able to find the handful of things that they're looking for anymore, and that could be detrimental to the adult populations, which I think, as I mentioned before, especially bad news. So it's just all of these compounding things that just will make things incredibly difficult in the future. And sorry, can you thank you so much, you are amazing. So I'll probably stop there for now, at least with the sea turtle talk, and I think I will continue this in a little bit. But I think next I want to talk about sort of adaptations and resilience, because a lot of this has been I feel like it's been me monologuing about, this sucks and this is so bad for turtles and we're all screwed and the turtles are all screwed, which kinda, yeah, but also there are ways that the turtles have historically shown resilience, and that they could continue to show resilience. And there are ways that we as people can help to improve their quality of life, their well-being, and their overall outlook. So it's not like, oh, we'll just forget about it. F the turtles, who cares? It's not worth it. No, it could be worth it. And that's the reason why we need to have programs in place and why it's important that we put some funding out. And again, with turtles, a little bit can go a long way, even just being aware of things and doing small things to improve their overall habitat can make a huge difference. So even just nowadays, if you're on the beach, especially at night, so sea turtles, something that I didn't even know this until I started working with them. Because they don't tell you this in the general public, which they really should. But sea turtles are, like I mentioned before, they're very finicky and very particular about their nesting habitat, which is advantageous because it makes sure that their offspring are given, good quality places to live, or, a good start, right? But they are very timid. So they're also very sensitive to light. So sea turtles, light pollution is a big thing for them. So if you look at maybe the sea turtles, I don't know, on the western side of Florida versus Miami is prime real estate for turtles, or it should be. But there's so much human development there and so much light pollution that they're just not going to get that much there. And if they do, it's because the turtles have no other option. And so with the light pollution issue, if you're on the beach at night, don't use a white flashlight. Sea turtles, so you say, oh, don't use a flashlight. How am I supposed to see when I'm on the beach at night? First of all, if there's a moon, you can use you don't need anything. Just try to use the moon and let your eyes adjust. It takes about 15 minutes or so, but, you'll be fine. But obviously there are instances where it's a safety issue, and so, for that, when that's the case, if you can, get a red flashlight, because sea turtles cannot see the red wavelengths of light like the rest of us can. They see different wavelengths. So that is what we use as researchers, or what people use as researchers, to be able to, work around sea turtles without disrupting them or interfering with their process. Because we don't want to scare them back to the ocean. We want to encourage them to come and land nest. Ideally, don't use anything at all, but if you have to use something, use a red light, or even just put some red cellophane or a filter over your light. And that's a makeshift thing that can work. A lot of times, if you're in an area where there are management programs, you can ask people about it, and they'll be able to help you out, either by giving you some red cellophane, or just by pointing to where you can get a red light. But I'm sure you can always get them online too. And then, but yeah, light pollution is big. And this isn't just individual people walking the beach. This is what type of lights they have in all the buildings that are within view of the ocean themselves. So if you haven't, for instance, ever gone to the Georgia coast, especially places like Jekyll Island, where they're really cognizant of sea turtle well-being and sea turtle nesting habitat, you'll see that a lot of the lights along the coast, along the shore there, that they use within view of the beach, are actually have an orangish reddish tint, and that is because they're invisible to sea turtles. So they do that so that, to people it's okay, why is it this color? But for sea turtles, they can't tell that it's, they can't tell that there's development there. So that encourages them to actually go up and do their thing, and we want them to do their thing, because that increases the range for their habitat that is viable and actually able to be used. So that's one of the basic ways that even you now can just be more mindful when you go out there in an area where there could be sea turtles. Use a red light, or don't use a light at all if you can handle it, because white lights are very bad for turtles, and they are bad in the sense that they'll scare them off or will prevent them from coming up to shore at all. So yeah, there's that, and other than that, there are things you can do, such as leaving You don't want to leave furniture on the beach. You don't want to make sure that, like, if you dig a hole or something, you fill it in. I think there's like some TikTok challenge or whatever a few years ago, which is like, oh, dig as deep a hole as you can, which is like, are you kidding me? Because yeah, it's fun, but like afterwards, it's a responsibility to put it back the way you found it, because I mean, adult sea turtles, maybe they can navigate around it, but hatchlings, they fall in a hole, they're stuck. They're trapped. They use so much energy to crawl out of that hole that they really dig into their yolk sac stores, which is not good for them. So, I mean, ideally, just leave things the way you found it. Which, yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a buzzkill thing, but I mean, that's just kind of the way it goes, because the shorelines, there's so much wildlife there. There's so much, it's not just where people reside. Like, you're a visitor there, and so you wouldn't go into someone's house and then like knock over all the furniture and then just leave. You would make sure things are the way they found it. You found it. So that's kind of what you can do. And all these things, they aren't huge things, but what they can do is increase the overall quality of life for these potential nesting habitats in ways that will just give these turtles the best chance of survival. Because I mentioned a lot of these compounding factors that, you know, when you have warming and you have shore level rise and you have people and animals, you know, messing with the turtles on the beach, then it's like, yeah, it gets worse, and it gives less room for error, less wiggle room for the turtles. And when there are there's like too much going on for the turtles, it's harder, and you know, they'll be more prone to seeing the consequences of any one particular thing. But potentially, it makes it easier not that it makes it easier for them to evolve, but like if you have fewer turtles being killed off by various things, then that leaves a larger population that could be viable to develop traits maybe, or changes in behavioral shifts that help them to be more resilient to the big things that maybe we have less direct control over, like climate change. Like, we can't fundamentally stop everything or stop the sea. I can't wave my hands, wave magic wand, and stop the sea from rising, right? But I can pick up the beach after I go visit it, and that'll reduce a stressor for a turtle, so that maybe if that turtle, that'll help to maintain the population, so that one of the turtles somewhere will develop a behavioral change that allows them as a whole to end up shifting to be more resilient to the big stuff. So that is even how now we can help out the turtle populations, and why it's important to be aware of the way that we're impacting the world around us and the animals around us. So that's kind of that. It's not all pessimistic, but it's just part of being aware of, you know, what else is on this planet with us. You know, we as people, we're not the only ones here. And I mean, maybe after all this, you're like, okay, well, you know, why are you talking about this? I don't care about turtles. And okay, fine, I can't force you to care about anything, but, you know, just think about it, okay? But yeah, so anyway. To sum it all up, sea turtles are important, animals are important, and it's important for us to be aware of how our actions can impact others, and to not lose hope and assume that just because we can't change everything, that we can't change anything. Because we can change stuff, and we can improve the outlook for things, even in small ways. So yeah, with that in mind, I'll probably wrap up this video pretty soon. I might do a bit more off screen just to grind, but before I forget, okay, I gotta find the number 1, and I want to also summon Lugia while I'm here. I'll probably do some other stuff off screen, like trying to collect some more people. But I want to make sure that I'm recording when I finish up, because I think I heard that there's some like secret like cutscene or whatever somewhere for completing everything. So I want to make sure I do that. But if you made it this far in the video, oh my gosh, thank you so much for tuning in and just listening to me ramble about stuff, because it's something I'm really passionate about. And I think that sea turtles are awesome. I think that all life is awesome, you know? And I think that it's cool to just be interested in the natural world and have, like... So, yeah. So yeah, I'll probably in the future, I'll talk about like more about the specific adaptations that sea turtles have exhibited, as well as things that like management strategies that people can do for addressing some of these issues. And then there's also, I'll give you maybe some tips and tricks for those of you who want to like, are hoping to find a sea turtle while you're out. Like, cause again, I am not condoning, do not mess with a turtle if you don't have proper permitting. Like, that's just, do not. Okay, it's one, it's illegal. Two, it's just bad for the turtles. But you're welcome to watch from a distance, as long as you are not making yourself known to the turtle. Like, not letting the turtle either, because it's a really magical kind of experience just seeing that whole thing happen. So I can give you some advice on how to find them, maybe. Or at least the conditions that are right for turtles. I can't guarantee anything because it's nature. You can't guarantee anything in nature because it's so unpredictable, but I can give you that. All right, so anyway, Ghastly. So, not a fan of wind. Strongest of wind since I always get blown away. Okay. Said to appear in decrepit, deserted buildings. It has no real shape as it appears to be made of gas. I don't know, it looks like a blob floating around in some gas. Okay, buddy. Let me grab the, this thing. Alright, so, let me figure out this whole tidal bell thing. Ring it in an open space to call Lugia. You know, I think that Lugia would be a good fit for Bleak Beach, right? Right? Because I feel like that's kind of like similar habitat. Well, you know, Lugia's... He's from the Seafoam... It's from the Seafoam Islands, right? That's where it inhabits in Johto, I believe. So let's see if we can replicate that. Hey, it's raining too. That fits the ambiance. Alright, where should we put Lugia? Oh, I want to show you something also. So I found the most cursed Pokemon, and I decided to put him in a very apt location. So let me first show you real quick on the monitor, because we have to monitor this dude, because he is a threat to society as a whole. So this is our one camera. This is I have looking out for potential bird Pokemon. Then there's, oh shoot, where'd he go? Where'd he go? He's gone. This is in the sewers. There's a Mr. Mime in there, but he might have escaped, so I'm gonna have to go check on him. Because we do not want this dude getting out, because he is a danger to society. So you go in here, and then there's the wooden enclosure. Let me, we have 2 levels of this because, you know. Alright, where, yeah, Mr. Okay, so he's in his house. Alright, that's good. But yeah, Mr. Mime, I locked him in there. And this is like in the sewers, right? So you go down here, and then this actually leads out to, I think there should be water here. I don't know why it's, I don't know. I'll figure that out later. Yeah. Oh no, go, 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 go. No. Okay. No! Oh man. Anyway, how did I end up here? That's very strange. Okay. But yeah, that tunnel, if you follow it, boots you out here underneath the bridge. So yeah, that dude is right where he belongs, in jail, underneath in the sewers. But honestly, I don't really want him in Bleak Beach in general, so I might ultimately just decide to move him somewhere else. Maybe I'll put him like a floating island somewhere in the Sparkling Islands, so he can't hurt anybody. But yeah, he's a danger to society. And unfortunately, this game. Why is this dude? Why is he in every game? Like, he's in literally every Pokemon game aside from Scarlet and Violet. Which shout out to Scarlet and Violet for excluding the guy, because my gosh, we needed that. But yeah, I just, you know, who asked for him? Who asked for him? Like, is there anyone out there who's like his favorite? I don't know, whatever. Anyway, let's ring this title bell. I'm excited. Alright. When they're oh, wow. Come on, man. Alright, let's see if I can just like work on stuff here. So what is after? Oh, there's Gengar. Right, let me look up Gengar. So Gengar, he likes... Oh, he also likes to surprise and store habitat. Okay, well, I'll just make another one of those later. So let's go to the next one. Blissey. What is she like? Oh, she's kind of princessy. She likes cuteness overload, which I can do. And that requires a lot of the heart furniture. Can this guy help me to... You know, I think there's a way to, so Roserade tea is dry. So if I give Mosslax here some Roserade tea, that should increase our Lugia and Ho-Oh rate. In the meantime, we'll build stuff for Chansey. Let's see, whatever her name is. She wants a cute bed, cute dresser, cute lamp, cute table, and cute sofa. Which I finally go up. I mean, I guess I could do that. I finally got all the cute furniture recipes, which is awesome. So I can now do that. Thought I heard something. I guess not. Yeah, I don't want like Lugia to show up and then just be like to get out of here before I can actually ring the bell. Alright, so Zora lives here. I don't think anyone lives here. So, we can rectify that. Oh, wait. No, this is like a wide kind of thing. Alright. And then in that case, I had an idea. I had another area that I prepared. You know what? Maybe not in there. I don't know. What I'll do, I'll just set it up in this open space here. And then after I get that going, I'll just move Blissey once she shows up. Nice. Okie dokie. So now, combustion, furnace spot, or resort meal prep air, and then furnace spot it is common. You know what? I think I'll probably do that in the Withering Wastelands. Actually, let me make sure it's not exclusive to anywhere. Okay. That's fine. Oh yeah, I can do that easily. Okay. Now, contrary to what you might think, I'm actually not a huge talker. So talking that much about sea turtles kind of wore me out. But yeah, I think I'll probably finish this video for now once I'm able to commune with Lugia. Can I help you, sir? Okay, thanks. You know what? I think I will put Absol over here. Because I think this could be a good spot for him. Because it's a little away from everyone else. And I am going to build a bridge. But for now, I think this works. Oh shoot. Might be sorry. So it was a hammock. And then next to it, excuse me, Pikachu. A table and a couch. And then there was the, yeah, and then there's the sword light up on the, is that gonna work or is that too, yeah, it's too far away. Okay, well, I'll just put it back on where it was before. Dang, where is Lugia when you need him? I feel like these guys are always everywhere until you want them. Alright, let's put him... Alright, let me look it up one more time, because see how this configuration goes. Oh, so it's on the table. Okay, I can do that. Yeah, that's not bad. Never mind. Couch. Yeah, I do like the resort furniture. I feel like, I don't know, if I mean, it feels very beach housey, which is the point. But I definitely feel like if I were actually living here, I'd probably want the resort furniture in my house. Yeah, there we go. Okay. That works just fine. Let's set this up. Yeah, you better show up in the next few minutes, or otherwise I swear I'm gonna come for you myself. Alright, Garbodor. Oh, that's not bad. He is rare though, but that's fine. What if, instead of being super complex, I just move Trubbish somewhere else, and then wait for Garbodor. I am on high alert, man. I thought I heard wings flapping. Alright, Trubbish. At the risk of you losing your satisfaction rate, I think I'm gonna move you somewhere else. Would you be cool with moving in here with all these guys? How about here? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Hopefully that isn't too bad. Now this is an ideal habitat for a Garbodor. Which, I don't know, maybe I don't know. I shouldn't be prejudiced against Garbodors, but I'm not sure I want a Garbodor walked around my beach resort. Private makeup stand. Okay, I can do that. Yeah. So 2 of these. And then the closet. Sir, weren't you just sleeping inside the museum? How'd you get all the way over here? I think he's stalking me. Ah, man. I keep doing that. There we go. Golduck, why are you making this your business? Thank you. I think when she moves in, I'll remove the panels, and then I'll be able to put everything else kind of like inside. So I think with that in mind, let me just put this in the bed right out here. I don't like just store it somewhere and then forget about it. Again, it'll be waterlogged, but you know, she can deal. Lugia, you are in my time of need, not showing up. Pikachu space. Oh, I can do that, yeah. Alright. Let me see if I can find a Pikachu couch, though. Or if I can build one. And I can just snag that Pikachu doll from before. Okay, I guess I can't build it. Let me check the store. I might be able to buy one. I can. Nice. Okay. And then let me grab that Pikachu doll from over there. Alright. Okay. Okay. And, well, I'm just gonna put this here. Very big brother. Cafe space. 2 seats, 2 counters, menu board, potted plant mug. Okay. I really need to make sure I can find a way to actually get Sableye to move in somewhere. I guess it'll be like after the event ends if it's anything like what Hoppip did, but I just don't want to lose the dude because he's Sableye, you know? Oh, nice. 3rd time today that's happened. That's awesome. You know, I could make the cafe here. I think that could be cool. There he is. Okay. All right. Lugia. Gosh, why did I get so far away from there? He's still flying around. He is. Okay. Hello! Yeah! Oh, hello. I came because I heard the bell ringing, but I wasn't expecting to find a Pokemon. You are a Pokemon, aren't you? Anyway, nice to meet you. I usually fly around this area, so if you ever want to chat, just ring that bell again. That's it? You're not going to move into a habitat? Okay. Sleeps in a deep-sea trench. If it flaps its wings, it's set to cause a 40-day storm. Dude, careful with those things. I like the standing Lugia. He just looks like a dude, you know, like flapping his arms back and forth. Okay. Can you follow me? No. How you doing, dude? That bell you rang for me sure has a nice sound. I could listen to it forever. Oh, I'm so glad you like it. Hold on, let me get a photo with him. That's a great angle, I love it. Alright, see you later, dude. Yeah, that's just a man. That's just a dude right there. Yes, hello. Got like fingers and everything. I don't know. I like Lugia. Maybe I'll move the title bell over here eventually so we can be with the community. There we go. Prime real estate for a Pawmot. And with that, I think I will set this up. And we'll be good. Is he still over there? Yeah, he's just chilling. Anything else you want to say? My wings are pretty huge, yeah? Back in the day, I sent a bunch of Pokemon flying with a single flap. I think it kind of freaked him out. So I'm doing my best these days to not scare everybody. That's thoughtful. Got some thighs, too. Dang. Legendary Pokemon always look so awkward sometimes. I'll bet your trainer was a real good person, Ditto. Oh, he doesn't hate people. That's so great. That's so refreshing, honestly, to have a legendary Pokemon. That's like, oh yeah, I'm sure the person you were with is great. That's just the feeling I get from looking at you. You don't see Pokemon like me too often who could fly in the sky and swim in the sea, you know? Yeah, he's a jack of all trades. But I bet you could with that ability to transform of yours. It's cool how we're similar in that way. Yes, we are kindred spirits. Alright, so with that in mind, I think I'm going to sign off. My kindred spirit and I are just going to chillax here. But it was great. Let's see, we made some progress. Because it's 300, right? So 62, 262. We have to do Entei still. I got these two, which will show you. I found them on one of the islands, but I need to, and I moved them in to the Withered Wastelands. I'll show you where I set them up later. And then I guess I have to find Ho-Oh. So that's Entei. Let's see, Kilowattrel, Florigato, and Meowscarada. And then Noivern, the Duskull line, Superior, Dracopult, the Beldum line. I don't know. Oh, this is Gallade, right? I don't know who this is, though. Porygon. You know, there's one more Pokemon. Okay, Goldengo. That'll be cool to have. I do want to see if I can get Tatsugiri. Rare. This is Side Table, Beach Chair, Beach Parasol. Sweet. Oh, there's no point in placing more. Do I already have 8? Ah, that sucks. Okay, well, you know. I'll be walking by this area, so I'll be able to check. You good, dude? I'm just gonna... You can leave if you want. Flying on a clear day isn't bad, but nothing beats flying on a stormy day in pouring rain and howling winds. That feeling of the rain pelting you nonstop is just so nice. Oh. 4. That's Absol. This looks like a pleasant place. This area appears quite comfortable. Is that thanks to your efforts? The humans seem to have disappeared from this place, but I'm beginning to sense a spark of hope once more. I may not be able to offer much, but I'd like to help. If nothing else, please let me watch over you. Oh, that's so thoughtful. Thank you, Absol. Because of this Pokemon's ability to detect danger, people mistook Absol as a bringer of doom. Yeah. Good name was besmirched when he was just trying to help out. So what I'll do is put these Tatsugiri on camera and see if anything happens. And with that, I think I will call it for the night, because it's late. But I hope you guys enjoyed Sea Turtle Talk and the progress we made, and I will be back soon. So yeah.